How's it going, everyone? I'm back again, just watching myself play Path of Exile as per usual. I'm a little low energy today. It was not a terribly good day, but I'm looking for a little bit of escapism, and Path of Exile helps out with that. I'll probably play a little bit um, when I get a spare opportunity to. Yeah, no, I've had mixed feelings about escapist fantasy previously. I wrote a fantasy book once when I was younger. It was very amateurish. It was the first book I ever wrote, but I've always loved fantasy. And one of the things that I wrote about in it is it was kind of a meta book, and it got especially meta as it kept going. But a lot of it was about the nature of fantasy and whether it's supposed to be escapist or whether it's supposed to have a point. And I guess this is Tolkien versus C.S. Lewis kind of thinking, which I did. You know, I had my I had more of a Tolkien influence than a C.S. Lewis influence growing up. Although yeah, I had a fair bit of both. I would say that primarily when I was writing the book, I tried to make it very escapist, very just exploring ideas, things that I thought were cool. But as it kept going, as it got towards the end of it, I and part of it's writing a book for a first time. You get to the end, you're like, what's the point of this? Why am I writing this? Um, and I had bits where it got very meta, and it was very much about like, is escapist fantasy even good? Are people are we basically just ignoring our problems? Is it sedating us when there are other things that we should be doing? And I'm much older now. I wrote that when I was in high school, so it had a very very high school perspective to it. Um, at the time, it was me working through a lot of things. That's why I don't think I would ever publish that book. Is that book was a lot of me working through ideas that I hadn't quite come up with the answers to yet, and so it meant a lot to me when I was writing it. But I think I realized by the end of it, it was first of all it wasn't very well written, and secondly that it was very self indulgent. It was very focused on myself and things that I was going through, and it wasn't really written for anybody else. Um, and maybe there's a place for that, but um, I've come to love escapism. Not, I do like things with a message. I do like things that try to make a point, but I often find, especially as I get older, things that try to hammer the point into you, just like, here is the message, here is the message, here is the message. I hate those things. Those things are so annoying because it's like the second you understand what the message is, it's just it goes on and on and on. And that's not to say you can't explore different sides of something. It's not to say you can't explore multiple topics, and when you're exploring something that's really complicated and very interesting, it's going to have a number of layers. And now when I write books and the books have a message, I won't say I haven't quite developed the light touch yet. That's going to come over, that's going to happen over the course of just practice and practice and practice, where I'm starting boldly, where I'm trying to figure out what I want to say with the books that I write, and then I'm learning over the course of writing them how to dial it back and back and back. And so that one in particular, like I was saying, the whole idea of escapism, the whole idea of running away into the secondary world, as Tolkien put it, it seems very childish. It seems very, especially when you're a teenager and you want to be an adult, and you haven't quite gotten there yet. You haven't quite figured out what the whole life thing is about. You don't want to be childish. You don't want to be seen as a child. You don't want to be treated like a child. You want to move into adulthood and take on responsibilities and embrace life. And I don't think I had really understood that quite yet. I don't think I really understood the full intensity of that, but that's really what I wanted. And while I was writing that book and thinking through life, I think by the end of it, I was just enjoying the story, enjoying the characters, and what they meant to me. Not what they were going to mean to anybody else, but what they meant to me. And I think that so writing is extremely tough. The way that speaking is really tough. You know, I look back on my writing, and it's got a lot of the mannerisms that I have when I speak, which is not great. I don't speak very well. But I'm getting better. And the more I work at it, the same way that I'm working at speaking now, I'm getting better and better at it. And I'm very privileged to have that opportunity where I have the spare time to write things and really put my voice down on paper, or in this case, a video. It's a privilege not many in history could really afford or thought about. I'm putting my education to good use in that I can do things that are fun for me and develop myself. They develop my skills and what I would like to be a successful author. You know, if it came to be, if the stars aligned and people picked up my book or even just watched my videos, I don't set out with, I've got my day job and I've worked hard getting to where I am with my day job. Like I mentioned in the first video, all of the exams and all of the different things that I do, I'm not looking to jump ship on any of that. You know, I've got my family. I like providing for my family. But if I could write books that people enjoy and make money off of that, I'll tell you, that's much more fulfilling than a lot of the monkey work I do now. But I could do both. I could figure out a space for both. Like I said, priority number one is providing for my family. Priority number one is being there for them in any way possible. And it could be doing anything. I won't say that being an author is my ultimate dream. My ultimate dream is the family. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. However, I do enjoy writing. And if people enjoyed reading it, I think that would be great. That would be excellent use of my time and my skills that I'm developing. But back to the idea of escapism. You know, I had a not great day today, and it's nice being able to go to something that doesn't have a message, that you can just go into and is free of the latest news of what's going on economically or politically or even just like with people. Like, people get so exhausting. Just hearing what people I used to be friends with get up to, and it's like, what are you doing with your life? I won't get into too much detail. I don't want anybody to find out who I am and know who I'm talking about, but it's just so frustrating when you see the direction that some people go in, and they just go so crazy. I've gone crazy in my own way, especially after COVID. I have my own brand of craziness, and I'm keeping it secret less and less. So maybe I'm not one to really throw stones. It's just, people are doing things that I think are actually sickening in the world today. People are like abandon their any kind of moral values, of any kind of moral consistency. Oh, those crawfish, in the sides of the pools. That is such a cool environmental choice. I'm going to detour for a second and talk about that. But just, you can see like the bubbles in the pools to the side here. And when those are coming up, you know that if you walk past that, the crawfish or crawdads or whatever, they reach up and snap at you, and they become an environmental thing. I actually don't know if they deal damage. They probably do, but that's ridiculously cool. That's great environmental work. It means that you take things that normally are not meaningless, but are just purely aesthetic, and you give them a game function. That's so cool. It would be cooler, I think, and I thought this when I first played Path of Exile, coming through this area. I thought that was the boss. I thought that was the boss of this level, who I would encounter later on, and he was taking swipes at me before the fight, which I love that stuff. I love that stuff. It doesn't seem to be that way, though. It seems to be just random crawdads, crawfish in the pools. But that's still really cool. I wish that was integrated with the boss fight a little bit more. No, it is. Yeah, I'll cast judgment on it when I actually get there. It's just really, really cool. You see, it's different ones. It's different ones at different points in the pool. The Dweller of the Deep. The Dweller of the Deep. Yeah, this boss fight's really cool. Yeah, he's the boss, I believe, continuously summons these. Oh yeah. It does have these crawdads on the side there. So they are integrated with the boss fight. Like if you go into too close to the edge of the ring, the crawdads snap at you, and this is kind of a central one. But this thing over the fight just summons all of these different minions who you can kill them to refill your potions, like your healing, which you're gonna need because this thing's got a ton of health. So the summoning is actually really good for you, even though it seems like very overwhelming. Oh, I'm so close to dying. It seems very overwhelming when you're fighting it, but it's got a function which is replenishing your potions. So it's encouraging you to use your assets while you have them, and it just constantly puts you on the very edge of the fight. And on top of that, it's summoning these things which are shooting electricity. What are those? I can't even tell what those are. Essences. Yeah, it's summoning these essences and little crabs and all sorts of things over the course of the fight, which just blast the arena with AoEs. It makes it more than just a brute fight. It's got a lot of health and does a lot of damage. The summons give it this. It's similar to the Necromancer in that way. I think that the Necromancer is a little bit too heavy on the summons. Like, it's just continuously spawning these really tough enemies. I'm not complaining too much about that, though. No, that is a very, very well designed boss fight. The AoEs make it very interesting. The enemies are both there to overwhelm you and replenish your resources, and you're just hitting this wall over and over and over. And if you get chased too far to the edges, the crawdads snap at you. Beautiful boss fight. Love that. And it's so atmospheric leading up to it, like the crawdads snapping at you as you approach. It's really, really clever. Another thing is that I forgot to mention this as I was going on about about the escapism in the book, but there are those jellyfish enemies in the underground lair, the flooded depths or whatever it's called. The jellyfish enemies will stand stationary and charge up their electricity and fire it at you in a line. But when they're stationary, they turn very, very slowly, which means it gives you this sort of like the introduction to almost a battlefield positioning. It gives you the introduction to positioning, which you should have been doing already to a certain degree. Like, if there's a charging enemy, you can run out of the way of the charging enemy, and that gives you, it's building up this idea that it's not just about getting your health up and getting your armor up and getting your shield up and all of that. Also, you want to pay attention to the environment, because the attacks are not guaranteed to hit you. You know, maybe if you're in close combat, like the swings have a chance of hitting you, but the actual like electricity and the fire and these like rays, you can run out of the way of them and mitigate that damage altogether, which gives low armor builds a lot more variety. They become a lot more like tactical and battlefield oriented. It's kind of similar to like classic MMOs like World of Warcraft, where it's not just about getting the best armor, especially when you get into the raids, as far as I've seen, because I was never invited to one. They never invited me. But you will have to know, this boss is going to be using this type of AoE and it's going to hit these particular areas. Just don't stand in the areas and take damage over and over, you idiot. And also, there's going to be damage that's going to be hard to avoid, so put on the resistant armor to it. So there's a lot of strategy that can go into that, and it's very cool to see that in any context. Whenever I see that in a game, I really like it, because as fun as something like D&D can be, anybody who's played knows this. It's not a video game. Video games and Dungeons and Dragons are very, very different things. Oh, this is where I rediscovered the stash. I'm like, oh, that's right. I have this whole stash of things. How did I forget that? That would have come in handy probably a lot sooner. Anyway, better late than never. But D&D is not video games. D&D is, that aspect of, can I just get out of the way of this attack that's currently going on? I mean, that is there in D&D, but you don't react to it in real time. You don't see it charging up, and so you get out of the way, and they move too slowly to actually keep up with you. Mostly the attack has to go off, and then it has to be sustained after that. So if you create a wall of fire, that's sustained. You can move out of the way of that, but generally it's only after it goes off. And then you have something like Burning Hands, which is in a cone, and it's an instantaneous. It goes off, and then, positioning didn't really matter. The only thing you could have done is not be within 15 feet of the guy to begin with. One of the things about video games, one of the strengths of it, is that because everything's happening at the same time, you can afford to make a lot of in-the-moment damage minimization strategies. And it's not just, D&D and any role-playing game has to rely more heavily on dice rolls. It has to, on random chance. It's like, I avoided it not because I moved out of the way of it, but because I rolled a dice and added a number to it, and that tells me that I rolled out of the way of it, or I got caught in the attack. I wasn't able to do it successfully. It's a facsimile of what you can do in video games, but what you do in video games is also a facsimile of what you're trying to do in Dungeons and Dragons. They've got different strengths and weaknesses. But it's nice to play something, even just watching this. Even just watching this lets me get away from the daily troubles of only for a second, just immersing yourself in this world, these different environments with their own problems. It's not as if, and I think this is the fundamental problem with discussions about fantasy online and escapism, is people go, I want zero politics in the setting. You don't want zero politics in the setting. You want the setting's politics to be self-contained. So if I play, I was saying Dungeons & Dragons before, let's say Dungeons & Dragons, I play Baldur's Gate. I want the politics to be Baldur's Gate's politics. I want it to be within the world and the lore and what is going on in that city. I want that politics. I don't want to artificially take my real world politics and inject it into there. That's what people are complaining about. And there's like Tolkien says, there's room for not necessarily allegory, there's room for application. There's room for applying something in the setting to your real life. But allegory does the opposite. Allegory injects the real life into the setting. And that's not always what you want to do, especially when you've had such a when you've had a shit day as me. You don't want to the granddaddy crab. He could have made quite a chowder out of it. I love this guy. Yeah, you don't want to be brought back to your daily struggles over and over and over with no means of getting away from it. And some people will say, and this is what I was grappling with in high school, some people will say, well, you escaping it means that you're not addressing it. It means that you're ignoring it, and it's going to just get worse because you effectively abandoned it. And as I get older, I think that's complete horseshit. That's me wanting to enjoy something else for a second doesn't mean that I don't care. It doesn't mean that I'm not dealing with it. It means that I need a second to take a break and relax. And escapism can go too far, and that's a big part of what I was writing about in my book. I wanted to write about not using escapism as a crutch and not getting away too much, but instead using it as a tool to refresh yourself and get back at the things that matter. Well, that's not what I was writing about at the time, but now that I look back on it, that's what it should be about. And maybe I'll rewrite that book someday to be more for other people and less for myself. Maybe for people who were going through what I was going through at the time. That would be nice. But for now, that story is just for me. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. See you next time.